Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Inside the Stage Door. My guest today is an actor, a writer, a director, an editor, a comedian, a producer, a blogger, a theatre reviewer, a public relations practitioner, a mentally stuffed mum, and an all-round lovely human being. I'm exhausted just saying that. Welcome, Maggie Wood.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking me.
Now, I detect an accent. Where are you from?
I'm from Glasgow in Scotland. I grew up in a place called Castlemilk, which is a huge post-war housing scheme on the south side of Glasgow. So working class parents. So Glasgow, I'm a Glasgow girl, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could read the phone book to me for a long time and I'd still enjoy your accent. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Um,
I don't have an accent. You've got an accent.
yeah, what, love? And Maggie, why have you made South Australia your home?
Well, when I was 10, my sister got married to a guy called Dave Moses, and he was from Adelaide. It still is from Adelaide, and this was in 1972. And they came back here to live because Dave being from here. And 3 years later, headed out here as a £10 pom with my mum and dad. So I was 13 at the time. Went to school here, absolutely loved it, but mum and dad were a bit old to make all the changes. So we ended up going back to Scotland. But I knew this was a great place to just to be, but also to bring up a kid. And so when my son was born, I was determined to get back here by hook or by crook. And he was 4 when we moved out here. And that was 21 years ago.
Wow. Well, Scotland's loss is our gain.
I absolutely love this state. I love what it stands for. I love its tolerance. You know, I grew up when I was here in the 70s. Don Dunstan was the premier, and he was hugely influential on all his kids at school. And so, you know, we learned that lovely tolerance and that how everybody, no matter, you know, what your ability, your gender, your orientation, whatever, everybody brings something to the community and society, and that has been it left a real imprint on me.
That's great. Clearly very different from your hometown. A bit of lack of tolerance there.
It was interesting growing up there because it was along the lines of Catholic and Protestant. So,
Yeah.
you know, all us kids would play together until it came time to go to school. And because Catholics also have state-run schools, so you get Catholic schools and non-denominational, but they're all state-run. Well, we didn't go to any private schools. And so half your friends would trot off to one school and you'd trot off to the other. And then through our whole school life, I just remember getting battered for walking past the wrong school. And by the time I was 10, my mum had to hire 2 of the big girls that lived up the stair to bodyguard me past the Protestant primary school to get to the Catholic primary because I just get beaten up so much.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a fact of life from the soccer right through to kids. So it was a bit rough. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Maggie, I just wanted to ask, how long have you been a performer for?
My mum used to, you know, when I was a kid, my mum used to make me stand up for visitors and sing a song or say a poem or something like that. But I never really did it seriously until it's actually, oh my goodness, it's 30 years this year. I was 29, so yeah, that's when I decided, look, I've got to go and scratch this itch.
It's an itch that won't go away for some people, isn't it?
No, it won't. And even when you get tired, it morphs into some other version of, you know, some other facet. It's like performing in the arts is like a big diamond with all these different facets, and as soon as you get overtired with one facet, I find myself moving into another.
Yeah. Those who know you know you're a comedian and a very good one. How did you get into comedy?
So when we moved out here in '99, about 6 months, so towards kind of Christmas or just after Christmas, the SAFM breakfast show ran a competition for people to go and review shows at the Fringe and then come in the next morning to the show and give reviews. And you had to send in a tape. So a cassette tape, not a videotape. This was before smartphones. So I recorded a tape as if I was close up, as if I was hiding in a cupboard. Saying, and I think my first gag was something about me and my pals would go to Edinburgh, but we wouldn't go to a show. We'd just go into Princes Street Gardens and get drunk on cheap wine. And then by the time we were really drunk, people would just think we were street art. Street performance or something. So I won that along with a guy called Paul Schiller, and the two of us went around for a month. Anyway, after that, Amanda really encouraged me, and she kept saying, you can do this, you can do so much stuff, and she kept throwing opportunities my way till in 2001 she got me into hosting Sing Along a Sound of Music at the Capri, and that was kind of semi-scripted, and I knew that I was getting laughs, but I didn't know how, and I thought there must be a way of taking this apart and seeing how it works. So I went to the comedy school at Cobbett's Comedy Cellar that Dave Flanagan was running at the time. So I did the course there, and I ended up working there for 2 years before going out onto the kind of general South Australian scene.
Wow. And there's very different types of comedy, I believe. What's your type of comedy?
First of all, my mantra in comedy is do no harm. So people should leave the show feeling better than when they come in, and yeah, so there shouldn't be any hesitancy in coming to sit in the front row. So I tend to do observational comedy, anecdotes, rather than one line. There's the odd one-liner, but they're definitely kind of more observational anecdotes, thinking about life, as what I thought the life I had in Glasgow was normal until I moved somewhere else. I realised it's probably not that, certain aspects of it are maybe not that normal, like having to defend yourself physically by the time you're 4 years old.
Yeah. Maggie, do you have a memory of your worst heckler and how you responded to that?
I don't like hecklers. I find hecklers to be very tiresome.
Yeah.
Very tiresome indeed. Because when you're putting together a routine, it actually has a graph of how it starts and how the energy builds, and then you let the audience rest and build and let rest, and then and when you get people interrupting that, it brings the energy, it breaks the energy, and you have to kind of start again to build that up. So, but the worst heckler ever was, I think it was my first Christmas. So I'd only been in comedy for about 6 months at Comics Comedy Cellars. This guy at one point, just randomly halfway through my set, shouted, "Fuck off back to Scotland!" And I kind of went, because the venom, it was the venom in it. And I carried on for a wee bit then, but I just had to stop and I got off stage.
Yeah.
But the great response was, a guy called Jamie Hill was emceeing that night, and he said to me, "Maggie, if that ever happens again, don't let it throw you. If somebody shouts, 'Fuck off back to Scotland,' what you do is say, 'I'm not going back to Scotland. I love it here in South Australia. They've got the best food, yeah,' and get everybody to go, 'Yeah.' Get the best wine, yeah, yeah. They've got the best people, yeah, yeah. Except for that there."
Very good. Oh my God, I wish I was there.
I've never had to use it, but thankfully it's in the armoury.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. And speaking of comedy and hecklers and where you grew up, how much did growing up in Glasgow influence your comedy style?
One thing about Glasgow, and it's kind of a blessing and a curse, is that you are never able to get too full of yourself.
Right.
You know, people say there's this kind of Glasgow type of comedian. That's not a Glasgow type of comedian. That's just Glaswegians.
Yeah.
You know, if you play in Glasgow, the chances are the people in the first two rows are going to be 10 times funnier than you, but they've just never got up in the stage. It's just the way people talk to each other. It's always been about keeping it real and being authentic and telling your own story and not assuming that you can tell somebody else's story with authenticity, because you probably can't, because you haven't lived how they've lived. But if you actually keep returning back to your own truth and your own history, then that's where people will connect with you, because they will recognize that in themselves.
Yeah. For me, that's what attracts me to one of the greatest exponents of comedy in Glasgow, Mr. Billy Connolly, because he talks from his own experience and he laughs at it, and that's hysterical.
Well, that's and part of the way that he's come through with his humor, and it's how just about, again, all Glaswegians cope, is often a very black humor.
Yeah.
And it's used as a coping mechanism, because life can be, or could be quite difficult to get through. The men in the East End of Glasgow have got a life expectancy of, I think it's somewhere around 62 years. It's one of the worst life expectancies in the world, and it's the generational poverty, generational nutrition deprivation. It's not all about people eating chips all the time. When you've got nothing else to look forward to, eating a bag of chips at the end of the week is a treat, you know?
Yeah.
So, it's about coping with life, but it can seem really harsh to people who don't understand that context.
Yeah. Maggie, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you've taught comedy as well, is this right?
Mm-hmm.
How was the experience for you teaching?
It was really interesting, and it was. I started teaching comedy along with two of my colleagues, Kate and Kay, and we were employed by Country Arts SA to do comedy courses. One year it was at Goolwa, the following year it was at Strathalbyn, and they were specifically for women, because women's voices, and especially older women's voices, are not represented very much in the arts, and they don't see their lives reflected back. So it was about giving the women the language and the skills and the techniques to then take their lives and produce, look at it through the lens of laughter and through the lens of comedy. Because when you're able to do that, you build a certain amount of resilience. And that was the thing that really I just thought was fantastic. So after we did those two courses, I did set up Funny Farm comedy course, and I ran that a few times, and I ran some workshops during Adelaide Fringe as well. And it was great, and it's all about that. It's not necessarily about equipping somebody to go and perform, but more about equipping people to look at life through a comedic lens, and therefore get that perspective and that kind of distance, and be able to then deal with things. And I guess that does, when I say that, it does relate right back to using laughter and comedy to cope with life, which is, what we did in Glasgow.
What a beautiful gift to give someone.
Oh, it's great. When you see somebody just get it,
Yeah.
and that light goes on, and they're off, they don't need you anymore. They're off and running.
Amazing. Maggie, early in your Adelaide stage career, you were part of an all-female cast in a production called Steaming that was nominated for an ATG Curtain Call Best Comedy Award for 2006. That must have been extraordinary. How was that experience for you?
Oh, that was fantastic. It was so that was I had not done any theatre for about 11 years. at that point, and certainly hadn't done any in Australia. And it was Matt Byrne had an ad in the paper for cast for this show.
Yeah.
And I went along and I got the part. So I was I can't remember her name right now, but I was the caretaker in this women's bathhouse where the women would come in. It was a steam room, so they'd take off all the clothes and relax and talk about their problems and about their lives. Luckily, one of the only two parts who didn't have to take all the clothes off. And it was such an amazing experience. And I'll always be grateful to Matt for trusting me with that role. And it was such an amazing experience in so many ways, and very liberating in a lot of ways as well. It was, and then to get nominated for the award as well. And I was so happy because Maxine Grubel, who was in the show, actually won Best Actor. She played an absolute blinder. Yeah.
Amazing.
At the start of the show, when people aren't quite, au fait with the nudity that happens, we had Diane Corsten, and Diane's this gorgeous woman. She's tall and quite willowy and very bohemian. And it was her job to be one of the first people to come into the steam room, and she's chatting away. Oh, Violet, that was my character's name. Oh, Violet, and she's chatting away. But as she's chatting away, she's taking her clothes off. And by the time she's finished, she's absolutely nude. And so at Holden Street Theatres, where it's the stage is on the flat, and then you have raked seating. And there were a few young lads who they'll sit in the front row, But where Di had to actually sit in the end of this kind of massage bed, and she's sitting, and she's very, she's very upright, and I think she just had a boob job as well, so she was very proud of them. And she was sitting absolutely starkers, tanned, looking special. And these lads are about 2 feet away, and she's sitting there and delivering her lines. And I was trying to, respond to her, because at that point we're the only two people on the stage. And all I could see at the corner of my eye were these poor boys who were so cocky at the start. And first they were like that, and then they were like that. And then when they came back they did come back for Act 2 after the interval, but they sat up the back.
They got more than they bargained for.
They certainly did.
That's great. Maggie, you're also part of the Adelaide Fringe Award-nominated show, The Three Stuffed Mums. You're the mentally stuffed one, right?
Yeah, I am.
How did that show come into being?
Well, Three Stuffed Mums actually came about because Kate and I had known each other for a long time and worked with each other for a long time. We both did Dave Flanagan's comedy course at the same time, so that's how long I've known Kate. And then I met Kate shortly afterwards. And we kind of worked together on and off until 2007, when we were involved in a production called Titters. And it was the first all-female comedy showcase recently. I mean, now you can't swing a bat without hitting an all-female comedy showcase, but back in 2007, at the Fringe then, we were the only one. And it was a fantastic production. It was produced by Rachel Summer, and it was a great show, and we won the Adelaide Fringe People's Choice Award that year. So then a couple of years later, Kehoe and Kate had been talking about doing this thing about being a mum. Nobody talks about being a mum in comedy. Again, it's that women's lives are not reflected back at them, and certainly not older women. So they came to me and said, look, we could do this show, it would be really good. And at that point, I'd just done All Shook Up, which was another Matt Byrne show, which is a musical. And I was saying, oh no, I've given up stand-up comedy. And they convinced me, and I convinced them I said, we'll do it, but can we have some songs? So we didn't want to get tangled up in copyright, so we just decided to write our own songs. And we got Mike Pittman to, we would sing the melodies into a recording, and got Mike Pittman to do the arrangements, and off we went. And so that first year we were nominated for a Curtain Call Award. The season sold out, and I found a message to what the girls saying, "Hey ladies, we've now passed the 1,000 ticket sales mark." Who sells 1,000 tickets to a Fringe show? You know? So, like, heck, we were quite successful, and we toured that show for about 5 years. We did a new show of Three Stuffed Mums, Still Stuffed, in 2012. Amalgamated the two shows, toured them, South Australia, Melbourne International Comedy Festival for about 5 years, and yeah, we really wrung everything we could out of it. At that point, we then went off and did our own individual things for a few years until recently.
And you now have the virtual Three Stuffed Mums, I believe.
That's right, because we're all grounded at home. So Kate's been running a public speaking business. Kate has been on the ships, on the cruises, doing comedy there. I've been settling down in Adelaide. I have a day job, and I've been kind of just doing things here and there, and getting into directing. But when this pandemic came, it was enough to slow us down, and we said, why don't we get together? So now we do a twice weekly show called Three Stuffed Mums, the viral edition. And we're doing that and just having fun and seeing what happens.
Great! Wow, it's got a lot of life left in it yet, I think.
Well, people seem to enjoy it. Yeah, we're getting really good viewing figures and stats. So yeah.
Maggie, in 2014, you premiered your first solo comedy show at the Adelaide Fringe, The Joy Protocol. Could you tell our viewers how that show came into being?
Well, what had been happening is I'd really got into the area of business and life coaching, and was training as a life coach. And through that discovered the positive psychology. And when I found it, I thought, this is fantastic. So it's not about finding what's wrong with you and fixing it. It's finding out what you're great at and expanding that. Don't waste your time with your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Spend your time with your strengths.
Yeah.
And then everybody's energized and doing their best and happier and healthier. So I was a bit late to the party when I realised that Martin Seligman, who's the godfather of positive psychology, had just finished a year of being the thinker in residence here in Adelaide. So I think he's from Pennsylvania, from Penn State University. But I was reading one of his books where he outlined a model that he thought would be for happiness. So I took the elements of the model and then applied it to times in my life where I had just actually got it wrong and not done it properly. Turned it into a kind of comedy show with a top and tail of, context again. Here's what I'm trying to say. Did that 2014 at Adelaide Fringe, and then Victor Harbour and Murray Bridge. Yeah.
Thank you. Maggie, at this year's Adelaide Fringe, you had another success directing Tracy Crisp's sold-out show, An Evening with the Vegetarian Librarian. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I feel so lucky. So Tracy is, I know her from comedy. We've known each other for a long time, but she is such a talented writer and performer. She asked me if I would direct her show this year, and I had done last year's as well. And An Evening with the Vegetarian Librarian was the third in a trilogy of shows that explored her life through the lens of what had happened with her family. She had lived in Abu Dhabi for quite some time, and meanwhile back here, her dad got ill, then her grandfather got ill, and so a lot of the previous two shows had been a rumination on grief and loss. And then An Evening with the Vegetarian Librarian was about, well, here we are in present day, and we know all about Tracy through those lenses. What about Tracy through the, you know, the lens that her friends and her family have for her? And it was an absolute delight.
Yeah, fantastic. Has your experience as a comedian, an actor, a performer, did that inform your directing with Tracy? Did that assist you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, because you immediately have that advantage of knowing what's going to work as opposed to what won't work.
Yeah.
Um, you so you've got all the rudimentary stuff covered. You also have that element of connection with the audience as being the primary thing, because if you don't have the connection, it doesn't matter. You get $1 million production behind you, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So definitely, yeah, acting and comedy really fed a lot into what I was able to deliver for Tracy.
Great. Maggie, who are your influences as a performer?
More, more kind of comedy wise. I think obviously Billy Connolly for his authenticity and bringing kind of urban Scottish comedy into the forefront and validating our lives as we were living there. Adam Hills has long been a comedy idol of mine. I was lucky enough to share the stage with him a couple of times when he was still gigging in
Sorry, what?
South Australia.
Can you repeat that? You shared the stage with Adam Hills?
Yeah, but you know, like I was doing a 3-minute beginner spot and he was headlining.
Oh
So
my God, that's amazing.
I know, it's so good. But I always remember at one point I was hosting, and it was Amanda Blair again who got me to do this, hosting an international comedy gala at the town hall, and Adam was one of the acts, and he came in and he went, "Oh, hi Max, how you going?" And I'm like, "Oh, you remember me?"
Oh my God, beautiful. I imagine that doing comedy is pretty hard to do. The thought of it terrifies me. What advice would you have for up and coming comics?
First of all, have courage. Have courage to look at your own life and see how you can make comedy out of that, because that way nobody can steal your material.
Right.
Because it's your material. You know, it's your stories, and it's your life which is worth bringing up. And people get frightened about going into, you know, getting too specific about themselves, and yet we're hardwired as human beings to watch people and then try and connect in our heads how our stories match with theirs.
Yeah.
And some weird paradox is the more specific you get, the more universal your appeal will be.
Right.
So I'd say that. I'd also say be humble enough to take advice from people who are trying to help you. Because unfortunately, some people go into stand-up comedy and they think it's about, they see it looking like it's off the cuff stuff with some swear words in the middle, and they don't realize the years of technical skill that goes into putting together a fantastic routine.
Yeah, right. I imagine it's a lot of hard work.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
You got to love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're not hungry for it, you can't do it.
Yeah. We're living in a very, for a lot of people, well, for millions of people, an unsettling and a weird time. Why are the arts important to society? Even are they important at this time? Is that something people should be worried about? Focusing on the arts?
Definitely. You know, what's the first thing that people are doing in this time of worry and feelings of uncertainty? They've been watching Netflix. They've been buying books. The arts is the first industry that we turn to try and get a handle on where we are, to try and soothe us, to distract us, to instruct us. And yet we're the least looked after industry. And it's such a crying shame, because I've seen it in other places where when you put money into the arts, and I don't mean like lots and lots of money, but when you give artists a sustainable living where they can then create, because you need to be able to play in order to create.
Yeah.
And you cannot be playful when you're worried about where your rent or your mortgage is coming from, or where the food's coming from. You can't do that. It cripples you as a human being. So it's even more important in this time for us to support each other, artists, and whether that's reviewing somebody that you've seen on the TV, or whether that's giving a busker $5 because they've made you smile.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's so important.
Right. Maggie, are you working on anything at the moment?
So I am writing a novel, which lives in my head. I'm probably coming up to about the halfway mark of the first draft. I've never written a novel before, but it's my love letter to Glasgow. It takes place in Glasgow it starts at Halloween and it finishes on New Year's Day. And it's the experiences of 4 people who have a second chance to take decisions or reverse the decisions they made some years ago. The nights get darker, the veil between this and the next world thins, and people can maybe come and go as they want to. And so there's a wee bit of that as well.
Wow, I look forward to reading it. And once restrictions are fully lifted, what's going to be the first thing that you will do that you can't do now?
We will go and see our new grandson.
Awesome.
Who is in Yass, and he's our 4th grandchild, and he's been named after my husband. His name is Hudson
Wonderful.
Stephen Wood. And yeah, we will be jumping in the car.
Fantastic. Well, Maggie Wood, you have been an absolute pleasure to have on Inside the Stage Door. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for watching Inside the Stage Door. I've been James McCluskey Garcia from Reading Companions Australia. I'd like to thank our regular contributors, Ipskip Productions, Teppo Films, Tempo for 2 Productions, and All Pro Audio. Don't forget to like and share our page for upcoming guests and to get more information on our guests' shows. Thanks for watching.